Howdy. We're here in the Annapolis Valley in Woodville, and we're talking about something that made life a lot easier for farmers. Way back in 1938, we had this machine, and this would be a very special thing to talk about. But MariTIME Machines today is going to go back a few years before to talk about an Orchard Edition Massey Harris tractor. And we're doing that with David Killam. Beautiful spring day in the Annapolis Valley, and David Killam, I know you love old cars. I know you love, the Studebaker is a beautiful vehicle, but you also have some history, a lot of history with this 1934 Massey Harris tractor.
That's right. It's a 34 1220 Orchard. The Orchard is the defining feature, I guess you would say, the thing that makes it rather novel, because there are only 6 of these known to exist in the world. And at least a couple of years ago, mine was the only one that was in complete and running condition.
Do you know where this was purchased?
It was bought in Aylesford.
New, off the lot?
My grandfather went to Aylesford and said to the Massey Harris dealer, I want an Orchard tractor and I want it delivered. How I expect it probably came to Cambridge on the train and then probably on a horse-drawn wagon from Cambridge to here. So.
And it's lived here its entire life?
Yeah, my grandfather bought it new. My father used it all his working career. He had 4 tractors on the farm, but he always stuck with this old antique. And the hired men drove the better tractors, the newer tractors. But yeah, he did what he wanted, and he was happy enough to drive this old thing. I guess he kind of got a kick out of having an antique when everybody else was driving fancy, modern, shiny tractors. So if we want to talk about the Orchard, the difference between an Orchard and a standard was they put discs on the wheels so the tree branches wouldn't catch in the spokes. They put fender skirts on the back wheels. A standard, and those will come off with just 3 bolts, 2 bolts here and 1 in the back, and that whole fender skirt will come off, and then it would look more like a conventional tractor. The other thing that made it unique, basically no exhaust system. The standard tractor had a pipe coming up. This one shoots out to the side and not much of a silencer. The air cleaner stack is much shorter. The step in the back steps down where on a standard it would be level. The seat is lower and the steering wheel is lower. So those are the big features. Yeah, to get under the tree branches. According to the serial numbers from the Massey historians, there was only 132, I think, of these made, if the serial numbers are right, and they don't even know if they ever made that many or whether they had that block of numbers set aside for the Orchard model. That I don't really know. The other thing, according to the historians, these tractors were all basically, the parts were made in 1929, and then they assembled them until 34 was the last year for this exact model. In 35, they made a few little minor changes. One of the changes in 35 was they went to a 4-speed transmission, where this one's only 3-speed, and they changed the cylinder head design to give a little bit more power, and I don't know, maybe other reasons, but basically they tried to get a little bit more horsepower out of it.
And I'm sure it really helped with the work, because it was James Watt in the late 1700s who said, steam engines, how do I describe the power? And he was watching the ponies and he said, okay, 22,000 foot-pounds of work every minute from a horse.
Yeah.
That's how horsepower started.
Yeah.
How many horses is this?
Well, this is called a 1220, and the reason being it has 12 drawbar horsepower and it has 20 belt pulley horsepower.
Okay.
The difference is just the gearing and so on uses up horsepower. So, but there was a thing called the Nebraska test that every tractor had to go through back in the day to certify that they were doing what the advertiser said or the manufacturer said. And they claim that the 1220 actually had about 20 horsepower on the drawbar and about 26 horsepower on the pulley, but they advertised it underrated so that it outperformed what you were expecting.
That sounds
so I read.
In the muscle car area, when everybody said it was lower for insurance reasons.
Well, yeah.
Maybe a little different.
Here they were trying to give more than what you were expecting, sort of thing. So yeah, this is the last of this particular configuration. A rather novel feature on this tractor is what they call the U-tube frame. So that piece of half-round steel is the frame of the tractor, but it's also the oil pan for the engine. It's the transmission case and it's the differential case. The only part that's not in that is the actual drive gears for the back wheels. They're in a separate casting on the back end, but everything in here is all...
It's one big tub and everything?
It makes a frame and it makes an oil pan and a transmission case and everything. So rather interesting design, I think.
It's kind of hard to see, but you say as an Orchard model, the front wheels are specific, but the back wheels are not pneumatic. There's no suspension there.
This is all on steel wheels, and 1934 was the first year that you could buy rubber-tired tractors. Goodyear basically championed the idea of rubber-tired tractors. And in the old days, the farmer said, rubber tires are no good. Look at those great big spades, you know, how can a rubber tire compare to that?
Yeah.
So what they did, they had two identical tractors and they would go around to farm fairs and exhibition grounds and so on and hook these two tractors back to back, one on rubber, one on steel, identical tractors, and then they get people to vote who's going to win. Well, everybody would say, oh, the steel wheel, look at those great big lugs, they're going to just, the rubber tire tractor would drag that steel wheel tractor all around the field.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, fairly quickly people started to realize that rubber was way better than steel.
But this was a working tractor. What kind of work would we see out of this Massey Harris on this farm?
Well, my grandfather started an apple orchard. He actually was a doctor, but he had an orchard as a sideline, a hobby.
Apple a day, doctor, it's kind of making sense. Go on.
Well, apple a day, keep the doctor away. He was making apples to keep people from calling him, I guess.
Could be.
So my father, you know, kind of grew into the farm and eventually took it over. And yeah, so this tractor only ever worked in the orchard. Mostly pulling a sprayer, occasionally maybe pulling harrows when they were breaking up land to put new orchard in and so on, but the majority of its work was pulling a sprayer. In the 50s, or early 60s, I guess, when they came up with bulk bins, my father actually made a hydraulic lift for the back so he could pick up an apple bin and move it around. Got used a bit, not a lot, because the newer tractors were a lot better suited, but he did adapt it to various things.
David, you're really the holder of knowledge. You're the holder of this piece of history. This is really the kind of technology that is antique. It's museum quality, but it's still workable. It's still usable.
Yeah, it still runs and goes.
How often are you taking this out and going around the yard, or even?
We can see if it'll start.
What's involved with trying to start a tractor like this?
Well, to get started, I mean, assuming you've checked the antifreeze and you've checked the oil level and so on, you turn the gasoline on the little tank.
Okay.
You put the choke on. I'm just going to grab my gloves.
Yep.
And then you start working.
Well, let's just go take a look then. So before we do this, what year did they finally put a starter on a tractor, an electric starter? I guess it would be a problem or a challenge with the electrical system. Was that why?
That was one of the drawbacks to this design of tractor, because the flywheel is inside of that U-tube frame.
Right.
There was no real convenient way to put a starter on. So 38 was the last year they made the unit chassis tractor. 39 they went to an electric starter, a separate frame, separate engine, more of a conventional type tractor.
More modern.
But again, this is an evolution tractor sort of thing. And I mentioned checking the antifreeze, but in reality, back in those days, it didn't even have antifreeze.
Just water?
So you drained the radiator out at night, and then you filled it up if it was cold weather.
Right.
But you'll see this radiator is made so you can take a bucket of water and pour it in. It's got quite a big spout.
Yeah.
I gotta adjust that so it doesn't hit on the hood, but yeah, so you were supposed to drain the water out in cold weather, and then if you wanted to use the tractor, you just close the drain plugs, pail of water, or 2 pails of water, or 3, I don't know, it holds a lot of coolant. Yeah. And that's how you would fill it up before you go. So Sheldon, I think the ideal thing would be for you to take this tractor for a drive.
You're going to let me?
I think it would be a good training, training exercise.
All right.
And then you can devolve back into running a team of horses later.
No training wheels? Nothing like that?
It's
right. I'm up for it.
Not a high-speed vehicle, so I think you'll be safe.
All right, well, I'm up for it if
I'll get it
you're up.
running. You can
Okay.
do the operating.
All right. I'm nervous. Not as nervous as David. I mean, I'm confident.
Seems to me I've done this before.
That's to prime the fuel in the cylinders. Oh.
Wow. Now, does it want more choke or less? That's
I
always
think I intimidated it.
that's the guessing thing. Oh, so close. You're in business. So, push ahead on this to stop the flat wheel.
Okay.
Put it probably in low gear would be the safe one.
Low gear is this one?
Yep. There you go.
Okay.
And then watch, that'd be firming.
Hey! Lightning fast.
Here we are on the north shore.
Nice. Not going to win any high-speed races here, by any means.
I've taken all his modifications off. I put it back as close to authentic as I could get it. And again, now it's sort of interesting, back in those days, kerosene was way cheaper. It was like a quarter of the cost of gasoline. So this tractor and the red one both are actually kerosene tractors. So this tank is kerosene.
Right.
This little round tank is divided in two parts. Half of it is gasoline, half of it is water. The water is to go into the engine with the kerosene to help prevent detonation. And to operate it, you turn the gasoline on, start it sort of a conventional way, choke, throttle, and hand crank.
Yeah, yeah.
After the engine's running and it's warmed up, then you would turn the kerosene on, turn the gasoline off, and as the gas got burned out of the carburetor, it would transition over to running on kerosene. In order to facilitate the kerosene, you have a heat stove in the manifold, and I don't know if you can see, yeah, see the linkage there. So by moving that lever, you close a valve off in the exhaust pipe, which forces the exhaust to go down behind the manifold through this little stove and back up here and out. So that has a bunch of little pipes inside. The air fuel mixture is going up around these pipes. The exhaust is going through the pipes. They're almost red hot. That vaporizes the kerosene because, yeah, kerosene doesn't light very well. So, and then as you're working, you're supposed to adjust the amount of heat according to how well the tractor's working.
Just like that.
You can try a different gear if you want, and give it a little more throttle.
That's it. Here we go. Just like that.
You can try a different gear if you want. Give it a little more throttle.
So many memories and so many connections to your family. It is a real honor to be given this peek into the Killam family history.
Yeah, well, like I say, my grandfather lived in this house. My great-grandfather built the house and the barn. And then my grandfather, with his orchard, the orchard main property was about a mile up the road. But yeah, and I grew up right across the road from the main farm. So this always stayed with the farm, and basically, I guess it is still sort of attached to the farm in a way.
Oh, this is more fun than I'm allowed to have, David. take you to this. I can't believe this is something that I get to do. Traveling along this piece of maritime history like this. This farm tractor has lived in this farm, in this community, for all these years. And I get to do laps around the yard, push down all the navy lines. Lots and lots of fun. Hard day on the back 40, for sure. Gotta do the whole farm thing. Looking back to 1934, you mentioned Ford. That was, people really were using Ford tractors, and then Massey Harris came along. Is that fair to say, or is this history, you know the history of that quite well?
There were a lot of tractor companies back in those days. McCormick Deering, International, John Deere, Massey Harris, and some of them like Minneapolis Moline, Oliver, or you know, actually Oliver was called Hart Parr early on, but there were a lot of tractor companies. There was a lot of competition, but the real popular ones were certainly International, John Deere, and Massey Harris. I think were sort of the primary ones. Maybe somebody else would have a different opinion, but.
We saw the evolution from Massey Harris to Massey Ferguson, which was a Canadian company, or?
Massey Harris is a Canadian company, although these were built in the U.S.
Right.
And again, this tractor really is a Wallace tractor, which was a division of Case.
Okay.
Massey Harris bought the Wallace division from Case Tractors, and they just changed the name on them and put Massey Harris name on. And basically, they made this configuration of tractor from 1929 until 38. Mm-hmm. In 39, they went to a totally different tractor altogether. But so they got quite a few years out of that Wallace chassis, or whatever you would want to call it.
Round and round and round. I see what you mean. It would be easier than using a horse all day. Tractors don't get tired, but they do run out of fuel. That kind of makes sense.
The other thing that was very common was, as kerosene prices started going up and gasoline prices came down, most farmers just put gasoline in the big tank, forget about the little tank,
right,
and just run on gas, because it was, I know my father never ever ran this tractor on kerosene.
Really?
Because it wasn't worth the bother. There's a lot of drawbacks to running kerosene. One, right in the owner's manual, it says change the oil more frequently, because kerosene tends to wash down and go into the oil pan, right, and dilute the oil. You don't get as good fuel mileage, or whatever you would want to call it, you know,
efficiency,
gallons per acre of work or whatever you rate it at. But yeah, so kerosene is not as efficient. The big thing was the big difference in price made it worthwhile early on. But
so all of this advice was in the owner's manual, and you got this tractor from your grandfather, who purchased it new, and I assume they had the owner's manual when they were.
They do indeed, and it has survived all these years. What's that, 89 years now this tractor's been around? So there's the cover has fallen off, but let's face it, it's amazing that it survived as long as it has. But there's a layout of all the controls and adjustments. And yeah, there's everything in here, from how many gallons of fuel to expect to burn in plowing an acre in a field, or various miles per hour in various gears.
There's advice for me, things not to do. They even tell you what not to do. That's a manual for its time, I'm sure.
In first gear, it goes 1.5 miles an hour. In high gear, it goes 4.5 miles an hour.
Uphill and downhill, though. Neighbors are saying, what is he doing? Some crazy city slicker in a funny-looking outfit, driving around like he belongs on the farm. This is too much fun for one person. Too much fun. I can see, not too stiff. A little bit of suspension, a little bit of bounce.
Yeah, interesting too that tractors in that era didn't have brakes.
Okay.
If you pushed the clutch with those steel wheels, you stopped.
That would make sense. That would
Yeah,
make sense.
so there is a brake, but it's only meant to hold the tractor still when you're running a belt
Okay.
to an implement.
So it doesn't pull the tractor.
So the tractor doesn't
Yeah.
shuffle back and forth. What they discovered was, even at that, with the brake on, there's a little bit of slack in the gears, so things would wiggle and jiggle. So typically they would put a pole from that loop on the front of the tractor,
Right.
a pole up to the thrashing machine or whatever implement you're running, and then you could tension the belt and everything would stay. So the brake was
Right.
sort of useful, but not really.
Terribly practical.
That tractor weighs basically 4,000 pounds.
That's a heavy piece of iron.
3,950 something factory out the door weight. So, you know, it's a fairly heavy, it's not real monstrous, but it's all metal. There's no plastic, there's no, there's no lightweight parts on it.
Trailer home. So what is the future of a Massey Harris tractor of this age for you as you're now, if I dare say, mid-70s? And
Well, yeah, I guess that would be an accurate statement. Yeah, what does happen to these things? None of my kids, none of my grandkids are interested in them that I know of, so this one's going to stay in the barn as long as I'm here, I guess.
And it would be a real shame for this piece of local history and heritage to ever leave this community where it's lived its entire life.
True, and you know, people say, well, it should be in a museum, but what museum? The only agriculture museum I'm aware of in Canada is in Milton, Ontario. It would be kind of neat to go there, especially if I could get a plaque made up telling the history of this tractor, but that's maybe down the road, I don't know.
Just like that. Well now, you say you had to get out to shut it off, right?
You turn the gas off, it's going to lose its interest.
Oh, well, that's a good way to do it too. Turn off the fuel.
In neutral, and you should put the clutch back in.
There we are. That's how you leave it when you're done. Okay. Fantastic. And there she is. Well, that was a first for me, for sure. And
So there, you're going to become a farmer, no more TV host.
hand over the
Movie
keys.
host.
You can hand over the keys, and my people will be in touch with your people. David, thank you so much. You've given me so much knowledge and so much fun, and I really do appreciate that. And this is truly a piece of maritime history, and we're really grateful for you sharing with us.
Well, thank you for coming, and yeah, it was a pleasure to show the old beast off. It doesn't get a lot of use nowadays, so good to get it out and get it a little exercise.